Iryna, welcome to the show. How are you? Thanks for being here today.
I'm very delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today as we get into Iryna, the interpreter. But first, of course, we begin with Iryna, the person. So, how about we go back in time a bit and have you share with us where you grew up and what a fond childhood memory is of you growing up?
Absolutely. I grew up in a very small and very remote town. And as I was growing up, I couldn't imagine that a few years later, I will be sitting here and answering this question of yours. As I said, it was a very small place. I call it in the middle of nowhere. A very mining area with a lot of mines, a few fields, agricultural fields, and basically that's it. And definitely no hope for language profession in my hometown.
What is your hometown?
Just the name of my hometown, which sounds Chervona Partizan, I think explains a lot. When I'm asked what is my hometown and I say the name, people, especially local people here in Canada, get very confused and tell me, oh, it sounds scary. I hope your hometown is not as scary as the name is. This town is located in Ukraine, in the very east of Ukraine, which borders with Russia, and it probably can provoke asking other questions about the current situation there. But yes, this is my hometown, which is now going through a very tough time.
Definitely, most definitely. And I can completely respect that. So, not to worry. However, we do like to cover a little bit more about your childhood. So, tell us something about you growing up in this particular part of Ukraine that's has stayed with you throughout the years.
You know, interestingly enough, when I was growing up, I was always very fond of studying and learning. And basically, this is the only thing I did as a child. Perhaps because my grandparents loved reading, and since early on they taught me to read, and particularly smart books, as I call them. We had a giant library at home, and as a child, I was surrounded by historical books, documentaries, and detectives, we called them, like kind of fiction stuff. My grandfather was a reading maniac. He could read a 300 pages book in a couple of days sometimes. My grandmother was the same, and my mother was the same. This explains why we had a giant library. And the highlight of that time was that my grandparents were famous in their village for the fact that every time a new book would come to their local library, which was super tiny, my grandparents would be number one to be called and offered this book. Like they had the priority. Nobody could compete with them. They were VIP people.
Wow.
And sometimes when there was a delay of supply of books, they would go and read the same book a few times. So perhaps this explains why I became really fond of studying. However, not sure why foreign languages and linguistics. I remember that my grandfather, he was a very smart person to begin with, given the fact that he graduated from school when he was 10 years old. And the reason being is the war occurred, the Second World War, or the Great Patriotic War. And because my grandfather's family, they were Jewish, needless to say, what they had to go through and how they had to escape and how they had to go through challenges and hardships and a lot of negative things. So simply, my grandfather did not have a chance to finish school and to get any education. His education was life and his experiences, his devastating experiences he went through. Yet, my grandfather was one of the smartest people I ever known. And the only thing I remember him doing is reading, watching news, commenting on those news, telling me various captivating stories about war, about life at that time. And I remember clearly when I was 8 years old, I approached my mother and I told her, so if I have a choice of one thing to do on a regular weekly basis, can I choose to get an extra class of English? So I can pay to my teacher for an extra class of English just so I can speak English better than a regular curriculum can teach you. Because, at those times, the resources of my family were very limited, and my family consisted of my mother and myself, two of us, and of course, my mother was providing for our family. So she gave me this choice, and I chose to have an extra class of English every week, so 2 extra hours. And I remember that it took me a while and actually was quite a struggle to find a good teacher of English who would speak English, not Russian English. And I approached a few, even though they considered to be brilliant teachers locally, they refused, because when I opened up and said that I'm not satisfied with the knowledge I'm getting at regular class, I feel like I know so much more than my my classmates do. And I feel like I just stay in the class, being bored and doing nothing. Yeah, this is how arrogant I was, but this was the truth. The classroom, my classroom consisted of 30 kids, and you can imagine that to pay attention to every single kid wasn't easy for a teacher. Plus, out of those 30, maybe 2 kids were really interested in getting quality knowledge, and 28 kids were not. So when I explained to those teachers I approached what exactly my goal is, what my expectations are, they said, no, I'm not a good fit. Sorry. Yeah, but I was lucky, and I finally found a brilliant teacher. I will never forget her and will be grateful to her for the rest of my life, because she was a milestone in my life and brought me up onto a totally different level. This beautiful lady, she had a disability, and I'm not sure exactly what her disability was, because I never had guts to ask her, and I don't think it would be appropriate of me. But she was in a wheelchair. I know that she could walk, but her entire body was so small, and her extremities were not proportional at all. So basically, it was her disability was related, I guess, to her bones or something like this. However, she was extremely smart, very brilliant, and very passionate. Like, the most important, I believe, especially in our profession, is that passion, that inner impulse that is so strong that nothing can really stop you from doing what you would like to do. So she was extremely passionate about teaching English as a second language. She designed her personal individual program, very different from what I was taught at school. And I think that thanks to her, I am where I am now.
That's so
Yeah.
amazing. It speaks volumes of course, that one teacher that shows up in our lives to make a difference in one way or another. So thank goodness for those teachers. Absolutely. I'm curious, did your desire to learn more or learn the English language better perhaps than your classmates were, did that come from something that you were exposed to, or what do you think was that reasoning for wanting to improve with that second language? Was it your second or your third at this point?
English
Yes.
was my second language, I would say, at that time, yes. I'm asking this question to myself quite often, and I think there is still a little bit of the intrigue. Why exactly English? Why exactly a foreign language? Because I was interested in a number of things. At some point, I was thinking that I really enjoy law and I would like to become a lawyer. Then I was impressed by medicine and I was thinking to become either a doctor or a nurse. And all of those things happened before I turned 12 years old, because I started to learn English. I mean, like my extra classes, extra classes of English when I was 12. And not sure, perhaps it's the impact my mom made. I remember her telling me, as far as I can remember myself, as a person or as a child who could analyze things, I remember my mother used to tell me, you need to get good education. Good education will get you anywhere. If you don't want to be stuck in this little town in the middle of nowhere and do a mediocre job, you need to get good education. And my mother was quite bold and straightforward about it. It's not that she was trying to be unfair to other people or professions. However, she has a very solid position that if you don't want to be stuck here and do what the most of people do, something mediocre, and then people lose their ambitions and just go with the flow.
Right.
So she told me, if you don't want to do that, you need to get good education. And this I do remember for sure. And perhaps the fact that when I started to study English at grade 5, this is when we start to study English.
Mhm.
English is introduced to us at grade 5, at that time at least. Of course, everything has changed since then because it was so many years ago. But back then, we didn't know anything about English language until grade 5. So when I was introduced to the beautiful English language, of course, I was captivated by it. And I liked the fact that I could say something in English, I could understand the grammar, and I started to prevail over my classmates. So maybe this is where my passion began, and I wanted to achieve something more than just basic curriculum. And one of the things also that that I recall from those times is the ability to understand something. When I heard an English song on the radio, I could understand something, of course, not everything, but something. And I found that so captivating, and I thought like, wow, I feel so powerful. People are listening to those songs and they have no idea what the song is about, and I do. So it helped me feel powerful. So maybe that's why. And after I found that brilliant teacher and started my journey with her, then it's been always there that I need to learn English and I need to become an interpreter, because it sounds like a totally different world. It sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like if I become an interpreter and will be able to facilitate conversations between people, and I will be able to speak two languages at the same time, then it will make me super smart, super intelligent, and basically it will be my superpower.
Yeah.
And also, I think it goes back to that time when my grandfather was telling me various stories, and he was regretting so much he did not have a chance to get good education. And he always emphasized that intelligence is the power, not weapons, not money, but intelligence. So since early on, I was so brainwashed in a good sense that you must be intelligent if you want to become a noble person. And speaking English helped me to feel intelligent, I guess.
You say that when you started learning the English language and it opened the doors to a completely different world, it made you feel empowered to realize that you understood something that many others did not. And then eventually you having the thought of using that language or utilizing the language in a professional setting. Do you ever recall seeing a professional interpreter or something of the sort that made you want to desire to become that? Or was this just naturally something that you just thought about on your own?
Surprisingly, I have never encountered a real interpreter, a real professional. The max I encountered would be an English teacher who would go abroad, who would know how the real English language sounds. It's important to mention that in Soviet times, most of the English teachers have never traveled abroad. And I'm sure that my competitors would vouch for that, because you do know probably about Soviet Union and Iron Wall and all those things. So I remember, and now I'm digressing a bit, but I remember when I was admitted to the university, and I was admitted to the linguistics faculty, where we basically studied translation and interpretation. And our head or leading teacher, she has never been abroad. Like, she had no idea what native speakers were, and she has never talked to a single native speaker. She had very strong Russian accent. That accent they show in the movies and make jokes about, and yet she was trying to teach us English. But going back to the point, no, I have never dealt with a professional interpreter. Yes, of course, I probably heard something about interpreters. I read about them. I knew that there are interpreters who attend conferences, who do simultaneous interpretation. Of course, I knew about United Nations organization and their brilliant interpreters. I knew all those facts, but my information was, or my knowledge was theoretical. My knowledge was factual. I've never spoken with a real person, with a live person, with a live interpreter. But I did have a lot of natural impulse, and I could visualize myself wearing a headset and microphone and doing simultaneous interpreting. And again, when I started to attend my extra classes of English, I remember that a lot of my family friends, the friends of my mother, approached me with instructions in English language, because at that time, so what was going on was the Soviet Union finally collapsed, and now we had a supply of various things from Europe and even United States of America, and things like toys for kids were coming with instructions in English. So nobody knew what to do. And for example, if it's a toy, or I should say like a toy set that you have to assemble, but you don't know how because you can't read the instructions. And this is, it was my star time. I became a star because everybody would approach me. And of course, I had a lot of dictionaries, very quality ones, because fortunately at that time it was very easy to purchase them. And I remember I struggled a lot because there was a lot of technical language,
Right.
but I was quite successful. And in my little hometown in the middle of nowhere, I became famous for instructions translator.
About how old were you?
At that time, I was probably 16, 17 years old.
And you came to realize at that point you were merging two different worlds per se, right? So that was the ability, that superpower that you thought about as a younger child, all of a sudden being put into use, into good use. It sounds like fun use too. I mean, they're, especially for toys, how fun for those children that really wanted to find out how to work the darn thing. And here comes Iryna and figures it out for the parents.
Yes, very true. And again, it empowered me so much, and it comes back to that superpower in intelligence. It made me feel special. It made me feel unique. And again, being a teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old, we all have that desire to be recognized.
Mm.
And as I say, many people approached me, many people knew about me, and sometimes I would be at school and people would point out at me, oh, this is Iryna, she knows English, she knows how to translate instructions. And it made me feel so special.
Iryna, how did this solidify the work that you had already sought out to do? How did you feel in terms of your future in this profession, experiencing these things growing up with the world of language?
Interestingly enough, I did not have any solid foundation. I did not have any concrete plan what I'm going to do and how I'm going to utilize my skills and my knowledge of the English language, because again, there was not much to do in my hometown and even in the nearby area, in the whole region or province. But I was convinced that I shouldn't give up. I should give it a try. And I guess my passion overtook my rationale. I wasn't thinking rationally. I was thinking, I was emotionally driven.
Mm.
I guess I was mostly emotionally driven because, yeah, there was no concrete plan. The max I would do, I knew that the max I could do after graduating from the university is to teach English. But this is the thing, it was not my goal, it was not my dream. I did not dream about this profession. I like explaining things to people, but I don't have any passion about teaching English.
Right.
I had a concrete goal, very clear to me, that I want to interpret. I want to speak one language, and then I want to interpret that language into English, and vice versa, not teaching.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And where I was going to do that, I didn't know.
You mentioned earlier in the conversation that the hometown was a mining hometown.
Yes.
Were there aspirations of you staying there and creating a profession somewhere around the lines, or did you aspire to leave your hometown for something else in the future? What were your thoughts around that?
Yes, I aspired to leave my hometown for sure. I never had a plan to stay there, and if anything, that's why I worked so hard. And in terms of I studied so hard, was because I wanted to leave my hometown and I wanted to live elsewhere, but not there. And I knew that at some point I will be admitted to the university, which subsequently happened. And after that, I knew that 5 years later, I will have to make a plan. What am I going to do next? But even the city where I studied at the university, it was not my final destination. I always knew that. It was a bigger city, bigger than my hometown, and probably had more opportunities, but again, nothing that would interest me, that would be appealing to me. And when I was, I believe, third year student, I had a chance to travel to Europe.
This is third year of university?
The third year of university.
Okay.
Yes, there was an opportunity to travel to Europe. So what happened was I studied French as well. When I was admitted to the university at the first year, we studied English, obviously. And then we had a chance to add another language on the, I believe on the during the second year. So at year 2 at the university, we had a chance to add the third language, and I chose French. The choice was between French, German, Polish, and Spanish. I chose French because I thought it's a very beautiful language to speak. It sounds so romantic. So like anyone else, I had those typical thoughts about French language, how romantic it is, and that it is a language of love, and I really would like to master this language.
Yeah, you romanticized it, like, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, I romanticized it for sure. And so next, the group of students like myself who chose French and were very passionate about this language of love, we were offered an opportunity by our French teacher to go to France to practice our French. So basically it was a tour. It was like, typical tour where you can practice your French skills and just familiarize yourself with native speakers of French, which I think was a very good idea. And it was a bus tour.
A bus tour.
So
are you still, now let me pause you for a second here. The university was still located in your hometown, or at this point were you already out of your hometown going to university?
At that time, I was out of my hometown. Yes, my university was located in the regional center.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, fortunately, I was out of my hometown.
You already had a feeling of what it was like to live outside of the hometown that you thought eventually you would be moving out of. And now you find yourself on a bus tour. Is that correct?
Yes, on a bus tour to France. And needless to say that I had a whole spectrum of super positive emotions, and I found that life is beautiful and it is so different. And every single little tiny thing looked so impressive, special, unique, and different. So basically, I felt like I flew to the moon. Because interestingly, so the bus traveled through a few countries of Europe. We started our journey in Lugansk, which is the city where my university was located, all the way through Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, through Lviv and Ternopil, which are the Western Ukrainian cities, and then to Poland, and then from Poland to Europe, Germany, Italy, and France. And I can talk about that experience for another 10 hours. I have a lot of bright memories, and it was one of the most unforgettable experiences for sure of that time. We enjoyed.
Yeah, share. I'd like to get a almost like an imagined experience of what you were going through. So you mentioned that it was completely different, right? So in appearance, just give us a comparison of what you grew up seeing in your surroundings versus what you were seeing now in the different destinations in this bus tour, just to give us an example of how different your two worlds were at this point.
Yes, cultural shock number one was kind, polite, and smiling people. I couldn't believe that people who don't know me at all, they know nothing about me, they don't know my name, they don't know my nationality, and they say, hi, bonjour, comment ça va? We stayed at a few hotels. They looked more like motels because we wanted to save money. We are young students with very limited resources. And even at those simple places, I was in the elevator, my very first episode of cultural shock. I'm in the elevator, and a group of people enters the elevator, and they look at me, they smile at me, and they say, bonjour, comment ça va? I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. Of course, I know how to say bonjour. I study French, but I don't know what to say because I'm so surprised that people can be nice, can smile at me, and can say hi without any reason. And they don't think that I'm crazy if I say hi back to them without knowing them.
So it was that
and
relationship between strangers, just that mere hello from stranger to stranger.
Exactly. And the philosophical conclusion was that you don't need to know each other to say hi. You don't need to know each other's name to be polite and respectful. You don't need to know each other's biography to be kind and to be nice to each other. Very simple. This is what makes life beautiful and pleasant to live, and this is what makes this world enjoyable.
Do you remember that first feeling of when you experienced that? Did it confirm anything for you? Did you always imagine that this is how the world was, and suddenly you're experiencing and thinking it is true, or anything like that?
It did confirm a lot to me because I was very different from my people in my hometown, even in that regional city where I studied. I was one of those. I guess I always was in the opposition in terms of. It might sound horrible, but I've never been patriotic because I always knew that there is a better world with a better quality of life, with better people. And what I was experiencing in my hometown, in my regional city, was a lot of corruption, unfriendliness. And I was from that group, very small group of people who knew that this is just propaganda and nothing else. And those bad things they say about West, they call it collectively West, meaning Europe and United States of America, or North America, I should say. For some reason, maybe because of my grandfather, again, who was a very intelligent man and who was never a patriot of Soviet Union, who told me a lot of various things about Soviet government and things. So yes, it just confirmed my that journey, that voyage, I should say, and that experience just confirmed that I was so right by wanting to leave my hometown, and that there is a better life out there, better people who are kind, who are polite, who are respectful, who do know what human rights mean, and the quality of life. The quality of life, which means that things were done for people, not against people. And I don't want to idealize France or Europe, but we all know that there are general norms, and there is a definition of quality of life or politeness or kindness. And my hometown versus France, there was such a huge gap between those definitions.
Mm.
And while my hometown was black and white, you do this and you'll be prioritized. And to do this would mean comply, be obedient, serve, etc. And if you don't do this, you'll be treated as you won't be treated with respect. Let's put it in a proper language. While in France and other countries of Europe that I had a chance to see, everything felt different, and everything was multicolored. I could see a lot of colors, not only black and white. And because I myself grew up as a black and white person, and I'm still, until this day, I'm still struggling with that black and white thinking, black and white emotions, black and white rules, which I can't stand, to tell you the truth, because there were a lot of challenges in my life based on that black and white diagram.
Right.
While there were so many colors, and I could choose any color depending on the weather or the mood. And of course, again, it came back to the point of being empowered, feeling free, feeling what real freedom is, and feeling that you're living your life, you're not just surviving.
Mm. What did you tell yourself based on the experience of the outer world, or the world that was completely different from your world? What do you remember telling yourself after that experience?
2 weeks later, we had to go back home. And I remember that it was heavy on my heart. I did not want to go back home. I wanted to stay there. And of course, I told myself that I have to come back, no matter what, but I have to move forward, and I have to move. I have to leave overseas, because I want this type of life for myself. I want to be able to smile to people and say hi without knowing them, and without being judged, and without being called a nutbar, a madman, or things like that.
Yeah. Was there anyone in your life, or like family or friends, that were going against what your heart was desiring? Did you have anyone that was saying, don't do this?
For sure. Thank God, of course, my dearest people, my beloved people, like my mother, my grandmother, my grandparents, they were very supportive of my decision. They were totally on my side. They were encouraging me. They were empowering me, for sure. And those people mattered to me the most. Honestly, I did not care about anyone else's opinion. But of course, there were people in my family, like cousins, aunts and aunties, and uncles, especially those who were an older generation.
Mhm.
I had to listen to a lot of stories about how West is so backward, and how at that time they still called it Soviet Union, even though it was like 2005. But you know, those people, I think they're forever stuck in Soviet Union times. So I heard a lot of stories about how Soviet Union is the greatest country in the world, and the West is so backward, and there is nothing to do, and those countries are ruled by money, and you are making such a huge mistake that you are trying to leave this beautiful place. I did not comment. I just composed myself. I was polite and listened to all those stories, but thinking and doing my own thing.
Yeah, following your heart. Tell me a little bit more about now, where did you set your eyes towards? Where did you say, this is where I want to end up once I'm done with my studies? I want to go here. Had you made up your mind?
No, I have not made up my mind. I had an idea that probably I should move to Europe because it's close to Ukraine and I can visit my mother, my family on a regular basis. And just because I haven't known too much about North America or any other countries of the world, Europe is so close, right? We all know about Europe, and at that time it was very easy to get there. The borders were open, so it wasn't super challenging. And so I decided that I will travel, I will see how it goes, and maybe I will pick a country where I want to move. So I went to Europe again, and I remember how I fell in love with Sweden. And I was very motivated for a few months to move to Sweden. What attracted me in Sweden was the peace. It was a very peaceful country in terms of anywhere you go, the ambience is so peaceful, like it's quiet, there is tranquility. People are not noisy, and even if it's a supermarket or a shopping mall, it's always nice and quiet. and people are so composed. People were, at least my experience in Sweden, and I've been there a few times, was all these people are so composed, maybe a little bit reserved, but also very nice. And of course, the cleanliness, how pristine this country was. It's important to mention that I was comparing, at that time, I was comparing Sweden to Ukraine. And Sweden was extremely pristine and clean country. However, in winter time, it was extremely cold. The climate in Sweden in winter, at least for a person like myself, I can't tolerate cold. I would say probably cold is the only thing that I can't tolerate at all.
Me either.
Yeah. So for sure, I thought, no, what am I going to do here in winter? Because winter is so long and so cold, and they have heaps of snow. And how am I going to drive here? And of course, like any European country, they are very thrifty on heating, so they don't heat their homes really. And I remember every time I would go there and would rent a place to stay, I would be freezing. I would be wearing a pair of socks, another pair on top of another pair, another pair on top of another pair.
Yeah, sounds very familiar. Yeah. And mind you, I'm talking about California cold, so others will laugh at that, but I can totally relate.
Yeah, but trust me, California is tropics compared to Sweden in winter time. So yes, anyways, I decided no. I love Sweden, but it's too cold for me. And then you know how it usually works in life. Accidentally, my friend decided to move to the United States of America for her own reasons. And at that time, when I was trying to make up my mind where to move, she told me, why are you hesitating? Go to North America. It's the best place on earth to be. Much better than Europe because it's spacious. It's more modern than Europe is. And basically, she was a fan of North America. And she said, come here, explore. And if you don't like it here, you can always move back to Europe or to any other country if you wish. And I decided, why not? Why don't I get rid of that black and white thinking and become adventurous and see how it goes. And I think it was one of the biggest adventures of my life when I decided to completely change the course of my actions, to not apply any common sense, logic, again, black and white standards, and just decided to go to North America because why not?
Mhm.
And so I did. I applied for the United States and for Canada. United States rejected my application, but Canada accepted my application. And I said, okay, so be it. This is the sign. And I remember I was on the plane to Canada. I knew a couple of things about Canada. I knew that there is Vancouver in Canada, where I'm flying to, and I knew that Vancouver is located in British Columbia, one of the Canadian provinces. I also knew that there is Niagara Falls in Canada, and I also knew that Canada has one of the biggest, maybe the largest, Ukrainian diaspora in the world. And that's basically it.
Wow. Okay, so wait a minute. Let's pause here. So, did you have family, number one, where you were going?
I did not have any family. I did have friends. Yes,
Your
I did have
friends.
friends in Canada. Yeah. And when I made plans to move to Canada, then of course I got in touch with a few people and made inquiries and like, what shall I do when I arrive? Of course, I pre-planned my relocation to Canada. Maybe I am just trying to create an intrigue. I still did use my common sense, right? I'm a responsible person. So it's not that I was flying to nowhere. However, generally speaking, it's not like many people plan to immigrate and they take 2 to 3 years to prepare their immigration process. No, for me, it happened almost over the night, because I guess until the last day, I did not believe that my application will be approved. I think that the Soviet mentality, the limited and restricted Soviet mentality that always tells you that don't think you're better than anyone else, be simple, be down to earth, be mediocre. That mentality did not allow me to believe that I can be so lucky and I can be accepted to North America. So I knew that my application was in process. I knew that hypothetically there is a chance for me to be approved, and then I will have to plan my move, my relocation. But deep in my heart, I did not believe. I doubted. I doubted. I was suspicious. Like, no, me? No, I don't think so.
Would you say, Iryna, that you had low self-esteem as a result of your upbringing and as a result of, where you grew up? Or were you you're making decisions like a confident person, but did you consider yourself a confident individual up to that point?
I love how you formulated the question, because yes, it's interesting that on the one hand, I was quite ambitious, and some of my decisions, some of my ideas were very confident. But I think on the other hand, I did have low self-esteem. I did have issues with low self-esteem resulted from my upbringing and mentality and just the surrounding I was living among and all those things, you know. So it was like there was a struggle all the time. On the one hand, there was a very brave, courageous, ambitious, and I should say, self-determined person on the one hand, but on the other hand, there was always a critic, or even like, you know, a bad policeman who would say, no, it's not possible, and who would drag me down by black and white thinking. So that's why when I understood that it's not a joke and my application is approved and it is time for me to collect my belongings and get out of here, it was an accident. Meaning that sometimes when people now ask me, how did you move to Canada? My answer usually goes, accidentally, by accident. I had a week to first of all sell all the things I didn't need anymore. Second, gave the things I didn't need to my mother, who still lived in my hometown, and now I lived in the regional city where my university was located, and where I stayed after I graduated. And I had a week because, first of all, I did not want to delay my move. I was thinking, like, why should I delay? I don't want Canadian government to change their mind.
Yeah, there's still that little piece, right? That was saying that could change. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and on the other hand, of course, it comes down to the flight tickets and the price of them. There was a certain date within the next week or week and a half where I could purchase really affordable flight tickets. So I decided, oh, I don't want to wait any longer. And yeah, within a week, I collected all my belongings and I organized the shipment of them. Some of them I just sold out, and some of them I gave away. Some of them I moved to my mother. And I think at the time, because so many things were happening and because I was emotionally very unstable in terms of, well, you can imagine it's a fusion of emotions.
Right.
And it's a number of very exciting and unique things going on. I think it was like the state of your mind and your body when you feel you are on the edge of insanity in a good sense, and you don't know whether it's true or it's a dream. You're just sleeping and you're dreaming, you're having a dream. All those weird
yeah, it's
weird
like almost
feelings.
Adrenaline, right?
Yes.
That's having you go instead of anything else. So you arrived to Canada, and what was your first thought as to what's to happen next? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do recall. Of course, when I landed, I was very tired because overall my flight took 36 hours.
Wow.
I had to do 2 stops. And yes, that's why. And one of the stops was like 8 hours at the airport.
Wow.
And it was Germany. And because I did not have a visa to Germany, I couldn't leave the airport. So I had to stay within the airport for 8 hours. So yeah, it was quite exhausting flight. So my brain didn't function too much. However, when I landed and went out of the airport, all that fatigue and exhaustion went away and excitement came back. I just couldn't believe my eyes how beautiful Vancouver was with all its mountains and greenery, trees, flowers, landscapes. Everything is different, right? At that time, I mean, I'm living here for 10 years and I'm still getting I'm still, how would I say that? My
You're
mouth drops. My mouth
yeah.
drops still when I go hiking, for example, or just going outside of the city to the suburbs and see all those beautiful mountains and landscapes and sceneries. It's still very exciting, and it makes me feel how I felt that very first day. But that very first day, it was such a very uh, pleasant, innocent, I would say, such a very innocent feeling of happiness, pure joy. Basically, I felt like a kid in a toy store where I could choose any Barbie doll I wanted to. And yeah, for the next 2 weeks after I landed, I was just walking around, traveling around, exploring and enjoying this beauty, and couldn't believe that I'm here finally in this beautiful place. And again, for those 2 weeks, it's interesting. It's difficult. It's difficult to describe the emotions, the thoughts,
Right.
but that state of your mind and your body reminds you, when they say this person is out of their right mind, not in a negative sense, but in a sense that basically you are going for so much joy and happiness that you constantly have butterflies in your stomach. And it's almost like you are high because no problems worry you. You don't think about any issues. You're just a pure, happy person with no strings attached. And it feels like the life is going on, but it's going on without your participation. You don't care what's going on there. You are just enjoying this world.
An
And I
out-of-body
wish,
experience.
yeah, I wish I could have those feelings and emotions back. I wish I could feel like this every single day of my life.
Yeah, no kidding.
But now, 10 years later, I'm just a typical Canadian working nonstop, and yeah, I have to remind myself periodically that life is beautiful. Don't give up.
Sure. Sure. Let's go back to the language aspect. Did your French language skills come into play immediately after you got to Canada, or what was that like for you?
Such a painful question because shamefully, no. In British Columbia, we don't speak too much French. To tell you the truth, I can hardly barely hear any French on a daily basis. English definitely is the most spoken language in British Columbia, even though there is a fusion of languages. It's a very multicultural province.
Mm.
So yeah, definitely French is one of the official languages of Canada, but not in British Columbia. And I remember that when I came, I was so excited that I will strengthen my French. And I indeed attended a French school for a few weeks. I think even throughout the first year of my stay in Canada, because I had time, I had free time. I was a new immigrant. I had nothing to do. So I attended a number of schools, including French. But a year later, I found a permanent job, a full-time job, and I was done with my French until this day. And now my plan is one day when I retire, or probably win a lottery and don't have to work as much, I will come back to my French. The good thing is that this knowledge, this foundation knowledge you have, it's forever. So I know if I start learning French or reviving my French again, then I will pick it up very quickly. But the lack of time does not allow me to strengthen my French.
Sure.
And I think there is no need. The only time when I would need French is if I apply for a government position where French is required. But I have no plans like this, so.
Well, you quickly found out after a while that what languages were you actually needing to utilize interchangeably where you were, which was Russian and English, or English Russian, correct?
And Ukrainian, yes.
And Ukraine, yes, that's correct. So for those that don't understand or that aren't familiar with the different languages, Ukraine is its own language, and then you were also exposed to Russian. Am I correct?
Yeah. So what happened was, I will try to summarize because it's a very lengthy topic. Most of people, I'm sure, who will be watching this episode do know about Soviet Union and do know that Soviet Union consisted of a number of countries, and each of these individual republics had their own language. Like, for example, Armenia, Armenian language, Georgia, Georgian language, Azerbaijan, they had their own language, Tajikistan, Tajik language, so on and so forth. Same with Ukraine. The language of Ukraine is Ukrainian language, and I know many people will not agree, but I insist that Ukrainian language is very different from Russian language. Yes, they are similar, but they are different. So you can't say, I don't like when people from Russia or from Ukraine, when they are asked, are these languages similar? They say, oh yeah, very similar. I don't like that. I disagree with this position because no, they are not similar. And it's another topic or subject matter we can talk about later. But yes, Ukraine has its own language, its own national language, which is Ukrainian. But because historically, all of us, the republics of Soviet Union, were a part of Russia, were a part of Soviet Union, we had to speak Russian. Russian was the official language of Soviet Union, and needless to say, all of us had to speak Russian, had to learn Russian, know it, and speak it. And going back to Ukraine specifically, and my part of Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine, which is Donbass, I know a lot of people who have never heard about Ukraine these days do know about Donbass. This is the area which is a very hot spot of Ukraine right now, and there are a lot of bad things happening. So Donbass historically and geographically was occupied by Russia. We are not even talking about Soviet Union times. We are talking about like 1890 and those years back then. So many times the area of Ukraine, which is Donbass, was occupied by Russians, and so historically and geographically we were connected with Russia so closely that most of the population there had to speak Russian. And that's why I personally spoke Russian as a child. Even though I did study Ukrainian on the same level I studied Russian. And it's important to mention that for me, and I know you will understand me, and a lot of our listeners will understand me, for any linguist to know a few languages is a huge pride. And as a child passionate about languages. I wanted to know as many languages as possible. That's why I studied Russian, I studied Ukrainian, and was very proud that I know both. Plus, my grandparents on my father's side moved to Donbass from the western part of Ukraine for work, and they spoke Ukrainian. So I had an opportunity to practice my Ukrainian within my family on my father's side. However, majority of my population there spoke Russian. And when I moved to Canada, I spoke Russian until I met Ukrainian people who spoke Ukrainian. So I understood that I can utilize my Russian skills and my Ukrainian skills, which made me even more excited because it opened a wider horizon for me. I could interpret for Russians, or I should say for Russian-speaking people, because again, when we talk about the Russian language, we have to realize that here in Canada, we have Tajik people, Azerbaijan people, Georgian people, and they all speak Russian. So there is a wide Russian-speaking population, just like Ukrainian people from the western part of Ukraine, or just those people who for some reason prefer to speak Ukrainian. And yeah, so to summarize, and I will digress again based on the situation going on right now in Ukraine. For me, as a linguist, as an interpreter, this language conflict, or I should call it language battle, it's the biggest pain for me, and my heart is bleeding every single day when I hear people participating in the language battle. When they call Russian language the language of the enemy, or then Ukrainian people call on people from the east of Ukraine, stop speaking Russian and hate Russian language, it makes my heart bleeding because I know, again, as an interpreter, as a linguist, as a philologist, I know better than anyone else that language is power, and language is an instrument. It's not a weapon. It's not a subject to fight over. It's a privilege. It's an instrument. And in Canada, every single day, I can hear minimum 10 languages: Spanish, Hindi, Portuguese, Georgian, Armenian, just in my neighborhood, Hungarian, Polish, German, Swedish, and number 10 I hear would be Punjabi, of course. So all those 10 languages I can hear every single day in my neighborhood, because we have Swedish people here, German people, and Indian people, etc. So, and I'm sure there are more than that. It's just those languages I can recollect. And so imagine if all of us here in Canada or in the United States forced other people to stop speak their language and speak English only or speak Spanish only. It's a very frustrating subject matter. It's a very painful, I should say, discussion, and I hope that things will stabilize and people will understand that we need to be intelligent around it, and we don't need to judge each other by the language we speak. But to summarize, I still do work with Russian, Ukrainian, and I still help Russian-speaking people, Ukrainian-speaking people, and I'm very proud, I'm very grateful, not even proud, but I should say I'm grateful and honored that I speak both languages. And I think it's my power, as we spoke before, my superpower, And I would love, if I could, I would advocate for every single language on this earth. I think more languages people know better. And I hope that one day this conflict will be over and we will just continue our normal course of life, and we won't try to eliminate one or the other language.
Definitely. I completely agree. And hopefully that is something that occurs very soon. Going back to your story, Iryna, about Canada and work, eventually you land a job in which you are assisting in a legal aspect, legal as in a legal environment, utilizing your languages in addition to other skill sets. What happens there that makes you transition out of that and basically forces you into the language world, the industry of the beautiful world of the language industry?
Yeah, it's another interesting story, like another story in my life. So my very first permanent job I found here in Canada was an office assistant. I was working as an office assistant for an immigration company, and the immigration company was owned by the Russian-speaking people. And those people served Russian-speaking people, Ukrainian-speaking people. So again, I could utilize my language skills. And I performed a very standard set of administrative assistant duties, like was a very standard office job, but I could practice my translation skills, not so much interpretation, but I did quite a few translations of the official documents. And later on, I found out that in order for me to be a translator or an interpreter here in Canada, and particularly in British Columbia, I have to be a member of the professional association. I joined this professional association. I was admitted. I had to do an ethic exam and a number of tests and prove my experience, prove my education. So I did all of that successfully. And I became an associate member, which entitled me to perform certain, not all of the translations, but like regular documents like driver's license and letters of experience, and probably birth certificates and marriage certificates. So documents like that I was entitled to translate. And I could interpret, but there were quite a few limitations, restrictions, because I wasn't certified. And again, I became very motivated and determined to get certified and to broaden the spectrum of things I could do as an interpreter and translator. And here another journey began. In order for me to become certified, I had to either take an exam or to prove my experience. And this is the biggest dilemma or contradiction I've ever seen in Canada, is that in order for you to get a good interpretation job in court, for example, you have to be certified. But in order for you to get certified, you need to have experience.
Oh boy.
So do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yes. And so very interesting. But luckily, at some point, I received a phone call from a translation agency, and they told me that they have clients who need an interpreter. Those clients were Russian speaking from outside of Canada, and they had a court matter here in Vancouver, so they need some help. And I said, yes, of course, I'll be very happy to help them. And my involvement with these clients continued for a few years, believe it or not. Their court matter here in Vancouver turned out to be extremely complex, extremely lengthy, and you probably know how things in court are developing very slowly.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same in the United States.
Yes.
So everything was very slow, and they told me, so Iryna, we would like to use your services for as long as needed. And I was very happy to help. And I said, of course, I'll take care of your assignments for as long as needed. And thanks to these clients, I became engaged with the court, with court's policies and procedures, because now I had to attend court on a regular basis. And I learned an enormous amount of things in terms of terminology, court processes, procedures, rules, and how the judicial world basically works. And this is when I was really infected with court interpreting. I decided that, yes, court interpreting is something I would love to do because it is so intriguing, it is so interesting, and most importantly, it is so intelligent and intellectual. And going to court was and still is one of my most enjoyable experiences working as an interpreter. So this journey began in 2014. In a few years, I was able to get accredited with court just because I attended so many hearings. They gave me accreditation, but the accreditation was granted by the judicial system, but the court itself, not by my professional association. It didn't mean that I became certified. However, now with quite a few hearings that I have attended for a few years, I felt like it was time for me to get certified. And surprisingly, they told me that, sorry, we don't have an examination for your language pair anymore. There is no exam to take. So now you have to continue attending course and gather a certain number of hours to prove that you have this experience, and then you can get certified.
Wow.
So it took me another few years to gain the experience to prepare my proof of hours, to attend more court hearings. And the good news is that last time we spoke with you, I was accredited court interpreter, not anymore. A month ago or 3 weeks ago, I became certified court interpreter finally.
Congratulations, Iryna.
Thank you very much. It's really, it's a very rewarding, gesture from my professional association because it took me 8 years to get certified and a lot of effort, I would say. I think the good news about it is that I sincerely feel that I deserve the certification because my professional association made sure I would go through every single challenge and hardship to prove that I really deserve this certification.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, 8 years worth. I mean, that's a challenge in itself, and it shows determination first and foremost. Like, you know, we've already seen and heard is a recurring theme in your life. you're a pretty determined individual, and set your eyes on something and really follow through to make sure that you accomplish that. And I think we've been seeing that and hearing about it as a recurring theme in your life. And now here you are, after an experience of working other jobs, obviously to sustain yourself as you first get there, and ultimately knowing that, your desire was to use your language abilities in another way. You ultimately begin to follow that suit. But you were, in a way, you went from employee, right? I want to go back to that, to freelance. Am I
Yes,
correct with that?
correct.
How did you, how was that transition for you from being an employee in an immigration office, utilizing your skill sets, yes, but it wasn't a direct or a pure role of an interpreter or translator, right? You're utilizing still your skill sets, and then you make that transition. How was that transition for you?
The transition was very smooth, very easy, and as much as I enjoyed working for the immigration company, because again, it involved a lot of immigration law knowledge, and law is something I'm passionate about, as I mentioned. One of the biggest disadvantages of an office job is rigid schedule. You have to adhere to a certain schedule, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and this is something that doesn't work for me. I know there are people who don't mind or comfortable about working an office job. Not myself, for sure. That's why when I felt that doing a freelance work, I can get this extra benefit of freedom. Of course, I was after it. I just waited for the moment when I feel comfortable and confident that freelance work will make me enough income so I don't have to worry about things. Then I will leave my office job, which eventually happened. Again, it took me another few years. I became completely freelance and gave up on any office job in 2018. So it took me 4 years since I moved to, no, sorry, it took me 6 years since I moved to Canada. It took me 6 years to become completely, absolutely freelance. And now it's 4 years that I'm working as a self-employed person.
Great. Congratulations.
Yeah. And enjoy it very much. And I'll be bluntly honest, I don't miss an office job, and I hope I won't have to do it again.
Amazing. Amazing. Love to hear it. You became a medical and a court interpreter. So your specialty field, you say, is legal, medical, and social services. So there's a wide array there of services that you're able to provide, or the specialty areas that you're able to work in. How was that for you in terms of training? How did you obtain training? Where did you look for places that could support you in your journey towards becoming a trained interpreter in those areas?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that becoming a medical interpreter is the next chapter, and I have to give you some insight, and let's move on to our next chapter. And also it explains why I enjoy being a freelance interpreter so much and not to have an office job. So just before I made up my mind that I'm going to fight for my court interpreter certification, I decided to join a webinar. There is a company, I think you've heard about it, Boost Lingua. And I think they are an affiliate or probably partners with cross-cultural communication. So I'm not sure about their inner politics, but I know that they're somehow interconnected. And they have a very lovely person who probably doesn't know too much about me, but I hope she will be listening to this episode. And I want to say hi to her and thank her for kind of even change in my life. she doesn't know, but she did change my life, or at least was a huge motivation for me. And this person's name is Yulia Sparrow, and she was also a speaker here in your episodes, and this is how I learned about you. So Yulia, when I attended that webinar, Yulia was an instructor there. And she impressed me so much. First of all, she was very vivid and very, just a very happy person. I don't know, very lovely to be around. Maybe it's her energy, maybe it's her way of teaching, maybe the ambience she created. But you know, there are certain people that shine like a sunshine. And for a very unknown reason, you don't know, but you really enjoy being around them. And so the webinar was about idioms, cultural idioms, something like that. But then she talked about her experience, her career, because of course participants asked about her personal story. And then she started talking about medical interpreting, that she is a certified medical interpreter. And I thought, how interesting. I should look into it. And so basically, thanks to Yulia, I found out that you can be a medical interpreter too. You don't have to limit yourself, and you can expand your horizon if you want. But I understood, so I looked into medical interpretation, into the requirements around it here in Canada, and I understood that it's quite a different aspect of interpretation and definitely requires a lot of training, a lot of knowledge and competence and expertise. But as usual, we spoke about it before. I have an ambitious part in myself, and I decided never give up. Why not? So I signed up for my very first course, which was medical terminology. And I also contacted my local organization. We have a local organization here that hires freelance medical interpreters. And they told me you have to take a test, and if you pass the test, we don't require you to be medically certified, but obviously you have to have some competence. You can start from basic assignments. So if you pass the test, then you can work for us as a medical interpreter. So I started my preparation for the test. I studied a lot. I found out what exactly I had to study and what this test is about, and I passed the test from the first attempt. Was very excited about it, and I remember I attended my very first assignment, and my very first assignment wasn't too complicated. It was quite an unpleasant encounter because it was a cancer appointment. And you know how those cancer appointments go, and it was a consultation assessment when a patient is informed that unfortunately they found out that the patient has a cancer, and now we need to talk about next steps and treatment. So usually patients get very upset, and definitely it's a little bit emotionally difficult. However, I really liked it, and I thought it was very different from court interpreting, different terminology, different ambience, different set of skills, different set of emotions, but very interesting as well. And I thought, yes, I would like to continue doing it. And as usual, I felt that I need now to study more and more and more. I need to really work on my medical terminology because I don't want to be just a mediocre medical interpreter who is looking into the dictionary every single time. And you know, it gave me another impulse, like it was a new type of impulse that I need to be now really competent in this area. I will sign up for a number of courses. I decided, including medical courses, not only like medical terminology for medical interpreters, but maybe something about medicine and science. And I think the universe heard me. And since that first assignment, I also I always got an assignment which was so unique. Like for example, I think it was my third or fourth one where I came across the it's a very rare genetical disorder. It's called bullosa epidermolysis, which you don't really come across in real life, and there are like just a few cases in the entire world. It's a skin disorder, usually happens in kids, and it's genetic disorder, and as usual with genetic disorders, nobody really knows what causes it. My next one was Joubert syndrome, which is even more rare genetic disorder. And needless to say that those assignments gave me impulse, and also it was necessary for me to upgrade my skills to study more about these rare genetic disorders. And now I also do a lot of remote interpreting as a medical interpreter. And every single day, I come across new terminology, new diseases.
Yeah.
It's and that's
Absolutely.
why going back to your question about my transition from the office job to freelance work, in my view, freelance work has a lot of advantages and extra benefits, and one of them is you don't just live a standard life. When you do an office job, your life is pretty standard. You're pretty much doing the same thing every single day. You know your set of functions, and sometimes you find yourself like your life stalled every single day. You know the drill, anyways. And when you do freelance work, every single day there is something new. And not only in terms that you meet new people, you attend new settings, even though it's the same hospital, but it's something different every appointment. But that vibe, it's a different vibe depending on the nature of the appointment, depending on the even structure of the appointment, whether you have to be present in the patient's room or it's just a doctor's office, and or maybe it's some, I don't know, a patient needs to do MRI or CT scan, and you have to be in that special room with all those amazing machines and equipment.
Exactly.
It's very exciting. For me personally, I find it very exciting, and I really enjoy doing this.
It's so great. I think it's what's even more wonderful is to hear how you continued in your pursuit to this particular field. And there was a lot of self-training, but there was also a lot of self-motivation. I think, you're very self-motivated and self-driven and go out there in pursuit of what interests you. And that's very important. As we get to the close, Iryna, of our discussion today, I'd like to give you the opportunity, thanks to your different experiences, to reach out to someone that may be listening to your story today and finding some words of encouragement. What are those recommendations now that you've had these different experiences in your life, particularly as you moved into the language profession, that you would like to share with others that are currently listening to your episode?
Yes, for sure. My number one recommendation to professionals like myself who doubt themselves or who think that they don't have enough knowledge or skills or opportunities, or who think that when they grew up, when they were growing up, they did not have a chance to enjoy those privileges other people had, I would recommend them to never focus on their weaknesses, to only see their strengths, to stay confident no matter what, and to take every failure as a victory, because we don't learn from success, we learn from failures. And to look at failure, so my personal, I think, mistake was that I was too focused on my failures, and I took them personally. and I looked at them negatively. That basically that wasn't helpful for sure. So my recommendation would be to look at your failures positively, first of all, to look at them as your lessons that will bring you up, they'll move you forward, and will make you a better professional. And yeah, the only thing that I find really helpful and your main power, I would say, is focusing on your strengths. Focusing on your strengths, listen to your heart. Don't listen to that voice of your low self-esteem that stops you from achieving that you would like to achieve. And go, never give up.
Absolutely, yes. I think that many would agree after listening to your story that you went from what you described as a very black and white existence to you taking control of the crayon box and
Yeah.
coloring your own life out in the way in which you wanted to see it played out. And you continue to draw, of course. Our stories are always evolving if that's how we choose to thrive and live in this world, is continued involvement. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, Iryna, to be able to share your story on this platform. I find it highly motivated and inspiring when I connect with individuals that have listened to the episodes first and foremost, have been inspired to share their own stories, but then to be able to connect with them directly and hear where they went, where they came from to where they are currently, and how language has changed the trajectory of their life in one way or another. And so I want to thank you again for being here today and sharing your story. But before we go, I'd like to give you a moment to share, where can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do?
Very good question. I guess because I'm still quite a humble or shy person, I don't really advertise my services even too much. But I have a Facebook page, and it's exactly my name. And our listeners can find me on Facebook, where I share a lot of things about my profession, about my everyday life as an interpreter, and things I like. A lot of photos of my dog. Unfortunately, I lost my dog in April of this year, but I had her for 11 years.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And she was my baby, and there are still a lot of pictures. So if people don't mind seeing a lot of pictures of my dog, then definitely there will be some information about me. As well as people can Google my company name is Law Wise Translation. There are some reviews on Google about my company and just some information about services I provide.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to link that information down in the episode notes should you wish to connect with Iryna and find out a little bit more about her and the services that she provides. Iryna, thank you so very much again for the opportunity. I look forward to sharing your episode.
Thank you very much, Mariah. I was delighted to take part in this very interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to more.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Feel free.
Okay, all right. So going back to my black and white thinking, and that today I felt like I stepped out of my comfort zone. I absolutely agree. I've never been a public person just because I used to think that I need to be shy and humble. No need to show off. It changed a lot, this position of mine. I understood that if I want to become a prominent interpreter, or at least to stay on top of my industry, I need to become public. I need to interact with my peers. I need to participate and get involved in the events and just experience sharing. But the problem with that is in Canada, I find like we have a very few opportunities, if not to say none, for interpreters like myself who are very ambitious and eager to learn more, to grow more, to gain more and more professional skills and knowledge. I don't see any opportunities. Even when I was trying to get myself educated with medical terminology, I had to take a course in the United States. Right now, I'm in another course, and it's again in the United States. I did not find any course, any educational opportunity here in Canada. And trust me, I looked really hard. And I spoke with a few of my peers from my professional association here in British Columbia. I received exactly the same feedback. And now, even when it comes to Facebook groups, I'm a member of a few, but all of them are based in the United States of America, not in Canada. And being a member of those groups, I can see that US interpreters are constantly involved in various events. They attend conferences. I know there are a few annually in California, and I believe in Seattle, and I believe in other states of the United States of America. But my question is, why there is none in Canada? If any of the listeners know anything about it and can share their knowledge and experience, I will be very appreciative. Or if there is anyone who is eager to group up and talk more about it and see how we all can get engaged in those professional events or organize them, I will find it very helpful. And I do hope that there are people like me out there, interpreters like me out there who have the same interest and struggling to find those events.
Yeah, that's a great call to action. Any other Canadian listeners out there, specifically, just because you're able to connect and put together these resources, I'm sure, like Iryna, that was able to, self-practice and gather resources and be able to self-teach yourself, basically, in order to prepare, be able to combine these resources would be an even stronger source of resource for upcoming interpreters, particularly any new generation interpreters that are looking to do this. That's a great idea, Iryna, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, just so that people can connect, because that's the idea with these episodes. It's that we are able to share resources and be able to connect with one another, no matter what part of the world we're in. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to suggestions and ideas, please.
Definitely.